You're listening to WVOF 88.5 Fairfield University, and this is The Sweep with yours truly, Ali Haidar.
And I'm Cole Townsend.
And thank you for tuning in to our 6th episode, I believe.
Episode 6, all right.
Episode 6. So it's been 6 weeks, and we're just glad to be continuing. And for those of you tuning in for the first time, The Sweep is a unapologetically progressive talk show in which we talk about wedge issues and a range of topics through a progressive perspective, one that is rarely conveyed in the mainstream media.
Did you mean to say Israeli? That's kind of what it sounded like.
Well, we'll find the answer. We'll find the answer to that later.
All right.
But we've got so many good stories coming out, so many juicy stories. And the biggest problem or the biggest issue that I found with the sweep and just on the WVF is just figuring out what stories to cover and what stories not to.
There's so many, and the fact of the matter is you don't want to cover ones that have gotten too much coverage sometimes because it's what's the fun in that? But I think this story coming up, it has to be covered because no collusion, no collusion, no collusion.
No collusion, it is, Colin. So, as many of you may have known, maybe through that iPhone notification that you get from the news app, or from
Twitter.
Just from anywhere, basically.
We now have Twitter, guys. Follow us.
Exactly.
I'm the Sweep Cole.
Follow me at Lebanese Ali, LEBAENESEALI. But definitely follow us. We'll be more active. And hopefully this recording, we're actually recording the episode for the first time, and hopefully it works out, and then we'll have a YouTube channel up soon.
So maybe instead of 8 audience members, we'll have 10.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll let you guys know when that's up and running. But anyway, so the first story that we want to cover is the Mueller report, or the Barr summary, and basically it's outcomes and reactions from both sides, and just a brief summary before we dive into the report itself. So we actually have the report out in front of us. So basically, no collusion. That's what our president tweeted out. And basically, according to Trump, the Barr summary, and Barr, who is his attorney general, stated that Trump did not collude with the Russians, according to the Mueller report. Also, another but interesting thing in the summary was that there was no exoneration for obstruction. So Mueller kind of left the question of prosecuting Trump based on obstruction of justice up to Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, and Barr, the Attorney General. They decided not to. And then already congressional Democrats are, already raising questions. And this just means that this investigation, which has haunted the whole political realm since 2016, might not be ending soon. So it's really interesting to see. I mean, I don't know about you, Colin, but me personally, at first I was really into the whole Russia investigation back in 2016 when I was a senior in high school, but over the last 2 years I've kind of become more skeptical.
Become a little bit more ambivalent to the narrative.
Right, because I just feel we live in a political time where investigations are just unfortunately, and I don't want me to say the Russia investigation is an example of this, but investigations have just become weaponized, right?
Tools.
They've just become weaponized, right? Remember Benghazi, which lasted, I think, a lot longer than the Mueller report and costed
way longer than it needed to be. Yeah.
So that's why I'm skeptical. But anyway, so we finally the report came out, and basically because it's Department of Justice procedure governmental procedure, we don't have the Mueller report itself yet, but we do have we have a summary from Barr, because he's the one who gets to decide what Congress gets to see from the report and what the public gets to see from the report.
And even that has caused a bit of a stir in that Barr has, written numerous reports about how he does not really believe it to be possible to indict a sitting president. And so that causes some skepticism, especially on the Democratic side, when you hear him talk about the fact that, there is nothing to charge Trump with in the Mueller report.
Exactly. And so the Barr summary was sent out to Congress, specifically Lindsey Graham, our favorite senator, our other favorite senator, Dianne Feinstein, Gerald Nadler in the House, and then Doug Collins, who's the ranking member on the. They're both in the Judiciary Committee with the Senate and House, respectively.
It's not just Lindsey Graham, by the way. It's Lindsey Graham 2.0.
Lindsey Graham 2.0. Never forget that, right? What do you say? Brett is my friend.
there are a few things that we can never forget, and certainly Lindsey Graham is now 2.0 is engraved into the cultural zeitgeist for eternity.
Especially, absolutely. And so basically the Mueller's report, so we have it out here, and basically just to summarize it from like what we think are the important points, basically outlines the Russian effort, because there was a Russian effort to influence the 2016 election, but it found, according to Barr, the Mueller report found that the Trump campaign or anyone associated with it did not conspire or coordinate with Russia in order to influence the election. And instead, it kind of, now this is the part that most people won't talk about because it really doesn't have to do with the investigation, but it's kind of cool. So basically, the Mueller report found that Russia tried to sow discontent or discord within the U.S. through two ways. One way is an internet research agency, which I've seen it before online.
Yeah, no,
which is weird.
We've heard about this before, and if you watched, what was it, Active Measures, I think it was called, they talked a lot about, like, the Russian troll farms, but they did also buy into the collusion narrative as well.
And, like, another way, that was one way through that organization, and another way was regarding the DNC servers, which were hacked, I believe back in 2016 or 2016. And what's interesting is also that the Mueller report, according to Barr, and I'm going to keep saying according to Barr because Barr is summarizing this, right? He's only got like a few direct quotes from the report. He stated that there were multiple offers from Russian-affiliated individuals to assist the campaign, but apparently no one from the Trump campaign accepted those offers, which is kind of like wishy-washy, right? Because it's like, did they not accept it directly, or did they not? You know, because like...
Yeah, it could be in the same way that Beto O'Rourke did not accept PAC money,
exactly,
but very likely organized it through. Did he still get some sort of help from the Russians, even if not officially?
Because, like, word of mouth, and this is why we have contracts and why we write things down, word of mouth can be twisted in certain ways. So I don't know about that. Basically, another part of the report, which the media has been talking about, which in the part that most Democrats who are... I don't know, most of them seem to be upset about this, which is funny.
Very upset, I especially if you look at MSNBC, or like a Hillary Clinton type individual. For the last 2 years, they have really focused very heavily on Russiagate, as we're calling it now. Personally, I was of the mindset that there seemed to be a lot of circumstantial evidence to suggest that was the case. I was rather surprised that, according to Barr, there has been no, coordinated effort to collude with the Russians, but at the same time, I'm glad, like in 2018, for example, we didn't make it an issue that we ran on in the midterms.
Definitely. And so this part, the obstruction of justice, and it's kind of weird. This is where I'm going to criticize Mueller because I just don't understand this. Mueller basically did not draw a conclusion to whether or not Trump's actions or the campaign, Trump's actions as president led to an obstruction of justice during the investigation. But instead, Mueller laid out arguments for both sides of the question. Yeah. And it's kind of weird. Barr includes a direct quote from the report, basically from Mueller, that states, quote, "While this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him." And what's frustrating about this is Mueller had 2 years to figure out all of this stuff, right?
Well, could it perhaps be that because, I don't know, perhaps a lot of this could be left up to the court, and for that reason,
well, that's the thing.
Mueller's like, who am I to decide, whether or not this falls under obstruction of justice?
Well,
but then again, I guess it's also his job to literally report on the...
I don't know. I mean, I don't know about the protocol about it, whether or not, how the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General have to decide whether or not there's conclusion. Do they have to decide if there's obstruction of justice? I think that's what it is. I think that they have to decide if there's an obstruction of justice. But either way, at least conclude yes or no, right? Yeah. I mean, you're leaving us with 2 years, and now it's going to feed both sides, Democrats and Republicans. And
it's mainly going to feed, I think, Republicans. I think Trump has been strengthened very greatly by this. A few weeks ago, we were reporting on the potential downfall of Trump with the tax plan, the failure of the wall. But this might be just the victory that and also the failure with North Korea. But this might be just a victory he needs, along with low gas prices, sailing into the 2020 elections to get reelected.
So I'll get more into this later, but after we go through more of the details and the reactions to the Barr summary, but I just don't know. I wish Democrats focused on other things. If they really want to take down Trump through
there's obstruction of justice, emolument clause, and personally, I don't know about you, and I said this earlier to you today, but I know the Mueller team has been relatively free of leaks, but I wonder if Nancy Pelosi in any way, shape, or form was tipped off to, the likely outcome of the Mueller report, because it was not long before the Mueller report was released that she decided to come out and say, hey, we are not really going to, pursue impeachment unless there is a very strong argument presented.
I think yes and no, maybe, but she's always been against impeaching the president. I remember when the Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, when she said impeach that mother effer, I think Pelosi also came out, not because of the language, but also like we shouldn't be impeaching. And that's like an interesting topic to have, and we should definitely discuss that on the show, whether or not...
Yeah, I mean, impeachment is... and that might even be an argument for why we should have a different process for removing a president, because impeachment was designed before political parties, and so they did not think when they were creating the notion of impeachment that one day it would be a very calculated maneuver, that even if Democrats do have the majority in Congress, perhaps they would not want to impeach Trump because, let's say it didn't go through, or let's say, there was another Republican running the next time around. It might just fuel the base.
Exactly. And, what I really want to get into is, like, about this whole thing, impeachment aside, because I don't think there's a case on that for collusion, Russian collusion. But, I think the funniest part and, like, kind of the sad part has been, like, the reactions to the Barr summary and, like, the whole, like, Mueller report over the last few days. And, I have some quotes here, some examples of people on both sides saying stuff.
Let's hear it.
So, of course, you have the original Donald Trump Jr., basically tweeted out, quote, after more than 2 years of nonstop conspiracy theories from CNN, MSNBC, BuzzFeed, and the rest of the mainstream media, as well as daily lies and smears coming from the Democrats of Washington, the Mueller report proves what those of us with sane minds have known all along. There was zero conclusion with Russia, unquote. And that's what he said in the tweet. And, like, just going off that, I mean, we can debate whether or not that's true or not, but basically what the Democrats have done, because they hit on this so hard, the whole Barr summary and the Mueller report in the months before, is that they've given them another talking point.
Yeah. And I think a bad part of that, too, is, now, we on the show and progressives in general often criticize the media, but I think we come from a more honest place. But when Trump and his right-wing compatriots criticize the media as being fake news all around, when you have places like MSNBC, which have hyped almost exclusively on, Russiagate for the last 2 years, only to find out that there is likely nothing there, it does lend some credence to his claims that the media is fake news.
Exactly, and I just think that, like I said, they've given them another talking point. And, like, you see this with, like, more quotes, right? So Ivanka Trump basically tweeted out some Lincoln quote that states, quote, truth is generally the best vindication against slander, unquote, and that was said by Abraham Lincoln, which is kind of funny because, like, if you want to talk about a president that lies, like most presidents have lied in some sort of capacity. Most politicians have, and they will. But
I think all.
I think here's the thing: Trump has probably lied about so many other things besides, like, Russia collusion, right?
He lied literally when he was reporting on it. He said no collusion, no collusion, no collusion, no collusion, a full exoneration, which Mueller literally says it's not.
Exactly.
Barr quoted him saying that.
So, I mean, I just find that ironic, right? But it's whatever. Ivanka Trump, like, she's kind of weird, right? She's like, she plays off some liberal talking points, but then she's like, wait, I'm Trump's daughter, never mind, like, in a way. I don't know.
She's just daddy's little girl.
Exactly.
She's doing her best.
And so this next quote is coming from someone from the Democratic side. It's not a congressperson. In fact, it's by Scott Dworkin, who's a co-founder of the Democratic Coalition Super PAC. And he wrote on Twitter, basically, that the Barr summary was propaganda. And so let me read you the quote. And so he basically tweeted, quote, the Barr summary is pure propaganda. It's a political document that was made for the sole purpose of defending Trump. Framed so Trump could claim he's completely exonerated from all crimes ever, which is nonsense. No more games. We need to see the Mueller's full report immediately, unquote. And I think what's disheartening about this, and here's the thing, I agree in some case, and to a certain extent.
We do need to see the Mueller report, but the rhetoric that we have going into it, where we have not seen it, but we are immediately dismissing Barr.
Here's the thing, look, I don't trust any Trump's nominees, to his nominees to like any positions in his administration. That includes Barr. But here's the thing: it's kind of the same way when Trump has been attacking the FBI and that's just the Justice Department over the last few months, and Democrats have kind of played it off, saying don't be attacking the integrity of the department whatsoever. It's the same exact thing that he's doing right now. He's attacking Barr specifically in the Justice Department. And look, we can look. I don't think Barr, like Colin mentioned about Barr not giving a clear answer about like indictments against the sitting president. But I just don't think you should be, espousing this, especially you should call it pure propaganda in a way, right?
Especially because we do not know what is in the Mueller report.
Exactly.
What Barr said could very well be correct.
It's just an assumption, right?
So it's a partisan assumption, and it makes you sound like a partisan hack. So what you should do is calmly, without using any accusatory rhetoric, say that, hey, this is a pretty pivotal moment. We should have the full Mueller report, without calling it propaganda or anything of that sort. Because, I mean, really, if it turns out the Mueller report is released and Barr's, read of it is spot on, that's just going to put the Democrats in an even worse place.
Exactly. And I just think, here's the thing. I used to look at the Democrats and think that they never do the same thing the Republicans do.
Oh.
But that's far, that was before we were born, right? if those you don't know, me and Colin are both, I'm 19.
I'm also 19.
We're both 19,
now.
so
Give it
1999 babies. But, so it's just unfortunate. That's just how the situation of politics is. But anyway, besides Mr. Dworkin, Pelosi's actually also come out and she said something. She basically said something along the lines that, I'll read the quote aloud. Quote, "We have to see the report. We cannot make a judgment on the basis of an interpretation by a man who was hired for his job because he believes the president is above the law, and he wrote a 19-page memo to demonstrate that," unquote. So this is like we were talking about. I don't trust Barr. And I'll be fair, Pelosi's comment is much more tamed and much more reasonable than
and technically speaking, right? It's a lot more spot on.
Exactly, right. And this, I have to say, I think I might have to agree with her, right?
I very rarely agree with Pelosi, but I even had to tweet it out. It was just like, I'll be damned, but I agree with her.
No, you're right. Because here's the thing: we should see the full report. The public should see the full report and take it as it is and make our own interpretation of it. Because can we trust what Barr says? I mean, in his position as Attorney General, sure, but as him as a person, no. And what comes first? Does he put his position before himself, or vice versa? We don't know.
Yeah. Well, maybe he's an impartial judge, the same way that Brett Kavanaugh is.
Hey, does he like beer?
You like beer, though? I don't know. We'll have to find out.
But so I don't know, Colin. You tell me, right? I don't know. Looking back at it, this is what I'm taking away from it. This is another talking point for the Republicans. This is just going to distract Democrats from, I think, other policies. And, going back, I think some Democrats have run in policy in the past, especially in November 2018. But I also think that some of them ran on this whole idea of Russian collusion.
I mean, some did, but okay, remember in 2016, everyone was like, the Midwest is Trump country. What are we going to do? The entire geographical landscape of politics has been completely and irreversibly changed and altered. But we saw sweeping Democratic victories in the Midwest, and a lot of those people who were running and who won, they ran on substantive issues. Mm-hmm. Things like protecting the ACA, right? Which, of course, we support Medicare for all in the show, but as opposed to having none of it at all, right? That's what they focused on. They focused on things like that as opposed to focusing on Trump hatred alone and Russia collusion. Even a few months before the midterms, there was still a lot of Trump hype. But as soon as midterms really started coming in, they changed their message immediately and started talking about policy. And so I think we do have to give the 2018 midterm Democrats credit for that.
Absolutely. No, what I'm just afraid is this might distract them from their future runs, right?
Well, and I mean, even right now, I mean, we'll see. Right now, Twitter is ablaze with Democrats talking about this. But so far in 2020, even if we haven't liked their substance, for the most part, most people have come out with some sort of substance. Save for Beto O'Rourke. Even Kirsten Gillibrand, she had a very substance-filled, opening advertisement video, right? Mm-hmm. So we have seen a lot of substance-based arguments right now.
Absolutely. And, I don't know. Do you think it was a witch hunt?
Do I think it was a witch hunt? I mean, I think especially if you look at like the way that Russian oligarchs tend to look for struggling, formerly wealthy and morally bankrupt businessmen, and the amount of scandals from Russian embezzlement groups and whatnot that came out of Trump Tower in the 90s, I understand the circumstantial worry. But Kyle Kulinski from Secular Talk, whom we bring up quite a lot, made a good point in that whereas Donald Trump has not done anything from a policy or rhetorical standpoint to condemn really either Israel or Saudi Arabia, even in the Khashoggi killing, right? Donald Trump has done some things like leaving troops in Ukraine and whatnot that kind of hinder a Russian agenda. And so, that could be an argument for all along. It's very clear that Donald Trump, though he seems to have a weird thing for Putin, was not necessarily his puppet.
Well, here's the thing. I think Trump is just a sycophant. So when he has a thing for Putin, he just wants to cozy up to him and be buddy. But I honestly don't think it was a witch hunt. I think the investigation was warranted. I'm glad there was a special counsel appointed, and I'm glad we can hopefully, probably won't, but we can put this behind us. But because think about it, when Trump said something to Russia, find those emails right during 2016, or the whole Trump Tower meeting with his son, and just the fact that some people associated with his campaign were charged, maybe not related to the investigation, but just shows that they are schemy people.
Well, I mean, we all know that. Donald Trump is literally known for that. I mean, American banks would not loan out to him. He's cheated many of his contractors, which I think just leads him to be, all the more prepared to run the Republican Party. Because if you think about it, what about after that record-breaking government shutdown where we were trying, Democrats were trying to get a bill passed to pay contractors?
Absolutely.
And Republicans refused to vote on that. They refused to vote for that, but they voted to get rid of the estate tax. I want to push back the Republican rhetoric that I've spoken to some people who identify as Republicans or conservative. That basically they imply, or some have explicitly stated, that this makes Trump invincible now, without the whole Russia collusion thing. But the thing is, you can hit Trump hard on so many other things, and rightfully so because there's evidence, right? And Bernie Sanders has been doing a great job of hitting Trump very hard.
So yeah, exactly. Do I think this has given Trump the 2020 election? Some conservatives say yes. I will say absolutely not.
I don't think so. I think it strengthens his case for his Republican base. Wow, that rhymed. But I don't think that it guarantees him a win. I just think it strengthens his case for his base.
We'll definitely have to see in the weeks after. Maybe if the Mueller report does get put out. I don't think it will, just because of how rigid and stubborn the administration is, unless Congress has really pushes for it. But I mean, today they failed on the veto to veto Trump's emergency declaration for the wall, right?
I'm calling a state of emergency. I mean, I don't really have to do this. And we're going to fail in the court, we're going to fail in the appellate court, then we're going to fail in the district court.
So definitely, this is something we'll definitely have to see in the next few weeks, and then we might even talk about this with the next episode. And I'm
sure this will come up.
This will definitely come up in the 2020 debates in the Democratic primary, and just national debates as well. And I'm excited to see, just because it's more political stuff to talk. But it's honestly, I'm also kind of saddened and also somewhat motivated now, and hopeful too that the Democrats will focus on, and like you said, they have been during the midterms, will even focus even more on policy. But I'm also afraid that this might distract them from doing so as well. Yeah. So
Democrats have not really been good at breaking out of the rhetorical framework set up by Republicans. I mean, look at neoliberalism, right? We're still battling Reagan's shadow and operating off of his models instead of creating our own thing.
Exactly. So we'll definitely have to see this in the next few weeks and few years, and they'll see the repercussions of it. So we'll definitely see. Anyway, thank you for tuning in. We're going to take a quick break. We'll play some few public service announcements, and
we'll be right back.
We'll be right back after a few seconds, few minutes. We'll be right back.
Thank you for listening to The Sweep.
Violence, theft, drugs, graffiti, it's all part of joining a gang. In times like these, we need to protect our kids and our community from gangs. Gangs often prey on teens with low self-esteem who perform poorly in school and who seek a sense of belonging. Protect kids from gangs. Know who they're hanging out with. Encourage them to become involved in school activities. Give kids a positive alternative to gangs. To learn more, visit ncpc.org or contact your local law enforcement agency.
A message from the U.S. Department of Justice, National Crime Prevention Council, and the Ad Council. Home safety is a family effort. Being safe and sound should be everyone's priority. In times like these, theft and violence can strike anywhere. Protect your family. Keep your home well lighted and always lock doors and windows. Installing alarms adds an extra level of protection. Never leave valuables in plain sight. To learn more about protecting your home and family, visit ncpc.org or contact your local law enforcement agency.
A message from the U.S. Department of Justice, National Crime Prevention Council, and the Ad Council.
You're listening to WVOF 88.5 Fairfield University, and this is yours truly, Ali Haidar.
And I'm Cole Townsend.
And you're listening to The Sweep. And so we're back. Before the break, we were talking about the Mueller report, but now we're going to move on to a few stories, which are still important, but
significantly less so.
We wanted to get that bombshell out of the way. I don't know if it was a bombshell or not, but and I guess the next story we're going to talk about, and of course you have to talk about this because this is my favorite subject, right, Colin?
It's our pet project. Israel, just the whole state.
Exactly, right? And specifically American-Israeli relations. And we're going to this last weekend was the AIPAC convention. The AIPAC is the American-Israeli Political Action Committee. I'm not sure if I said that right, actually, but it is it's the American-Israel Public Affairs Committee. Right.
There you go.
There it goes, right? And it's basically, if you listened to the show before, we've talked about the whole controversy, quote-unquote controversy with Ilhan Omar, but also with
quote-unquote, it's very controversial, dear sir.
I mean, depends on who you ask, right? If you ask, like, our friend Steny Hoyer, who we'll talk about next, maybe so, but, and so, for those of you who don't know, Ilhan Omar called out the pro-Israeli lobby, specifically AIPAC, about a month and a half ago. And it's just been like, Democrats have come at her, Republicans, of course, have come at her.
And, of course, they're getting ready to primary her in her district.
They've called her anti-Semitic, and which, we've discussed her comments on the show, and we truly do not think that her comments were anti-Semitic. She was clearly talking about AIPAC and the pro-Israeli lobby, and it's unfortunate because when you pull out that card, the anti-Semitic card, you trivialize actual
anti-Semitism,
right? You actual,
which is pretty rampant right now.
Right, exactly, it's on the rise
compared to recent years.
We've talked about this.
It's rather ridiculous that that's what we choose to focus on.
And here's the thing, and this is what angers me. At this AIPAC convention, right? You had the establishment Democrats show up: Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer. None of the presidential candidates go there because there was a Move On, which is a progressive organization, pushed them to boycott it. And none of them showed up there, like Cory Booker, otherwise known as Corporate Booker. Kirsten Gillibrand, Kamala Harris, and so all the presidential candidates, right? And so the Democratic establishment during the whole Elon controversy have always been calling for unity, right? Unity, or even before that, right? With the whole rise of the New Left, with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley, and all the Justice Democrats, right? Even progressive Democrats who aren't aligned with the Justice Democrats, but they've always been calling for unity, right? But boy were they hypocritical at the AIPAC convention, right? You had Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer. Steny Hoyer, if I'm pronouncing his name right, is the House Majority Whip, right? Second in command in the House after Nancy Pelosi. And he's part of the establishment that was calling for unity, that was peddling for unity. But they only do that when it fits their narrative and when they want to, right?
Oh, absolutely. That's kind of like the Democratic mantra, unity when it suits us.
And here's the thing. He called out not only Ilhan Omar, but also Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Rashida Tlaib,
yeah.
Right? And so basically, I'm going to read a few quotes that he said. For his first quote stated, quote, "I stand with Israel, proudly and unapologetically. So when someone accuses American supporters of dual loyalty, I say, accuse me," unquote. And this is clearly a reference to to the backlash to Ilhan Omar's comments, where she was wrongfully accused of accusing
them of having dual loyalty. But that was never something that she said.
When we say them, we're referring to American Jews, and basically people called out Ilhan Omar for accusing them of having dual loyalty, which she didn't. She didn't even mention Jewish in her sentence. She basically stated that
she was talking about Israel.
She was also talking about herself.
She
said, "Why should I be forced to have allegiance to another country in order to have a seat on the committee?" She's on the Foreign Affairs Committee, right?
Well, I mean, our Vice President actually has spoken about how she should be removed. I saw on Twitter.
I mean, Trump.
Follow us at the Sweep Cole. On Twitter, people were very supportive of Pence calling her out.
I mean, here's the thing: Trump has even called Ilhan Omar to resign, and he said an Islamophobic trope in which he said, "It's deep-seated in her heart," referring to anti-Semitism.
Which I think is interesting because Jeanine Pirro said the same thing. We covered that recently, but I think it's rather interesting because Trump really failed. He dropped the ball when condemning anti-Semitism on behalf of the alt-right when they, killed a woman in Charlottesville. And beyond that, if we are going to, get rid of Congress leaders because of, deep-held hatred within their hearts, then I think we'd have to expel the entire GOP.
Exactly.
We've talked about this on the show before, Lee Atwater, Barry Goldwater, the Southern Strategy, and how it really is about racial prejudice.
Well, let me just say something. For me, as someone who identifies as Muslim, who comes from a Muslim background, I'm just going to say it right now, the Republican Party is an anti-Muslim party, right? I don't know if you could say the same thing about other communities, right? Right? Hey, you know what? Here's the thing. When they come out and they stop promoting harmful messages, and like we talked in the last episode about the New Zealand terrorist attack, words matter, and I'm not saying that people need to be silenced, but words do matter, and that people need to realize that what they say has repercussions and all that. And so when the Republicans stop peddling anti-Muslim hate, and I'm not saying anti-Islam because anti-Islam refers to the ideology, anti-Muslim refers to the people, Republicans really peddle anti-Muslim. It's okay to criticize
Look, it's
Islam.
not that they're anti-Muslim. They just happen to think that when two civilizations touch each other, things go horribly awry. Look at Germany.
Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, you're right, Colin. So,
look at Germany.
Another quote, right? I've got two more quotes from Mr. Hoyer. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his last name right. Basically, he stated, quote, "When the curtain is pulled back, everyone can see what the movement truly is, a front for delegitimizing the Jewish people's right to self-determination," unquote. And he's referring to BDS, which is Boycott, Divest, Sanction, which is like a Palestinian non-violent struggle that's like but you're basically boycotting any companies that do illegal work with the state of Israel. Illegal work meaning under violating international law. Like
everyone knows that non-violent boycotts are often the most aggressive and hateful things.
Just looking back in our history, when people...
Martin Luther King, he was the most aggressive man in all of American history.
Imagine, how dare they boycott apartheid South Africa? How dare they, right? Just imagine that, right? And this movement was used to end the horrible actions in apartheid South Africa. And it's funny how because the word Israel or the state of Israel has become so untouchable, that once you mention that BDS, people like lose their minds when really, I don't believe in violence, and I think most people would agree that non-violence is the way to go. But if
violence
you're going to
be okay sometimes, right? Like Jefferson had a point.
I mean, didn't he commit adultery?
I mean, is that relevant?
I mean, I'm just saying he committed violence. I'm just saying, yeah. So
I guess, yeah.
Another thing about the show, right? Colin will say weird stuff sometimes, and I won't know how to react. Like, I'll just.
Do we have to give a disclaimer that I'm a weird person?
Exactly, and like, I'm just gonna take a break. Congratulate to Colin, that he hasn't said the fact of the matter, which is something he says a lot.
Well, the fact of the matter is, I just haven't had an excessive talking part yet.
Well. Don't worry. When we get to the next candidate, who I'm sure Colin will not butcher his name, Colin will be talking.
No, I Wikipedia'd it. I'll get it right.
And so so the whole AIPAC thing. BDS is a nonviolent movement. There's nothing wrong with boycott. It's a covert activity, right? There's nothing wrong to do it. It's not. It harms Israel economically, and and only because they need to pull out and stop the atrocities that they're committing in the West Bank and Gaza. And here's the last quote from Steny Hoyer.
Let's hear it.
He basically, and I'm sorry.
You've also said his name differently every
I
single
think so.
time.
I was about to mention that. I'm butchering his name, and not even purposely. Like I don't know what's going on.
It's a progressive trope.
It is, right? Maybe so. And so he basically stated, quote, and by the way, there are 62 freshman Democrats. You hear me? 62, not 3, unquote. And he's obviously referring to, most people thought he was referring to, like, the Justice Dems, which are more than 3, but specifically referring to AOC, Ilhan Omar, and maybe Rashida Tlaib.
They're like the big 3, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah.
I mean,
they've got power.
I'd argue even Ayanna Pressley, too, and,
there's a lot of people. I mean, there's a lot of good progressives in this freshman class. It just so happens that 3 get, the majority of media coverage.
Exactly.
But there's a lot of people doing great work on the ground.
Exactly. And so it just shows how the establishment doesn't really want union. Actually, I think as of today, he kind of rolled back on his comments. And so which is interesting. And actually, Ilhan Omar actually responded on Twitter to the things with AIPAC, and she makes a really good point. So basically, Netanyahu, I guess, was like broadcasted to AIPAC, and he basically focused on Ilhan Omar. And she basically stated that we are not even 6 months out from the Pittsburgh massacre. We are not even 2 weeks out from the Christchurch massacre. Yet the topic Netanyahu chooses to focus on was me, which is a good point. I mean, AIPAC didn't mention at all about the Pittsburgh massacre, right? Which was a terrorist attack at a synagogue. Ilhan Omar also tweeted, white supremacist violence is on the rise. Globally, right-wing extremists killed more people in the U.S. in 2018 than any year since 1995. Anti-Semitic violence is accounted for 58% of religious hate crimes. Yet they still focused on her, right?
So, yeah, I mean, also there's like this trope. Because once again, let's not forget what's put in the West Virginia State House. That very Islamophobic picture trying to connect, Ilhan Omar to 9/11, but when there's white, acts of stochastic terrorism, which is, this lone wolf terrorism often perpetrated by these white nationalists, it's rather interesting that we do not give that the same credence. If a Muslim were to commit that crime, it would be, conducive of the entire group. When, one white nationalist commits that crime, it doesn't really seem to be the same.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate. It's a double standard that we live in society today. And so that was basically what happened at AIPAC. And so before we get into the next topic, which, Colin, do you want to introduce the next topic before we go on break, just for a few minutes?
Sure. When we get back, we'll be discussing Pete Buttigieg.
How do you pronounce it? Buttigieg?
Buttigieg.
Okay. So... okay, is it Steny Hoyer? Steny Hoyer. Steny Hoyer. Okay, I know his name now. Anyway, we'll be right back.
Got 2 names out, ladies and gentlemen.
Exactly, there we go. They say progressives can't pronounce names, but we can. Yes, we can. And we'll be right back after a few PSAs. Stick with us as we discuss Mr. Buttigieg.
Did you get your flu vaccine yet? Make that your mission for today.
Did you say mission? Let's do this. Lee Majors here. The flu season coming up, we all have to help protect ourselves by getting a flu vaccine. And if you're 65 and older like me, you got to even be more careful. Look out! Our immune system may not be as strong as it used to be, so we have to do everything we can to keep the flu from catching up with us. Educating yourself about your flu vaccine options is important. It's also really easy. So ask about your vaccine options, because if you're a tough guy like me, you may need a tough vaccine. The flu can aggravate other conditions, so make it your mission to get the right flu shot for your age.
Lee, is that you? Did you complete your mission?
Oh, you mean the flu shot? No sweat. Visit the National Council on Aging at ncoa.org/flu to learn more about your vaccine options. That's ncoa.org/flu.
Exercise is hard. So is maintaining a healthy diet. Of course, neither is half as hard as dying. Type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and stroke kill nearly 1 million people a year, but most of these deaths are preventable with regular activity, a healthier diet, and not smoking. Talk to your doctor about your risk for type 2 diabetes and heart disease. You can stop it starting right now. Get moving. Visit checkupamerica.org or call 1-800-DIABETES. A message from the American Diabetes Association.
You're listening to WVOF 88.5 Fairview University, and this is The Sweep with yours truly, Ali Haidar.
And I'm Cole Townsend, and right now we are discussing Pete Buttigieg. Who is he? You may not have heard of him all too much before.
I just keep seeing his face showing up on my Twitter timeline. And I just want to really know more about him, Colin.
Well, we're going to discuss, because, you made a comment about him on Twitter, and I was just like, he doesn't actually know who Pete Buttigieg is, really.
I mean, to be fair, I watched his town hall, but most of the information I've really known about him has come through the centrist Democrats that I follow in Fairfield County. And
shout out to Alex Centrinsky.
And I basically tweeted that maybe all these people, these centrists supporting him means that I shouldn't support him, right? Because I'm a progressive, and usually my ideology is kind of it's counter.
It's skewed a little left from what the usual Democrats want.
But usually I like to keep an open mind to everything, and so I watched his town hall and everything, and he said, Buttigieg seems like a really good guy. I mean, super charisma, and he seems to have taken progressive positions. But here's the thing. Most of the Democratic candidates have taken quote-unquote
No. We're going to get into this right now, actually, because looking into Buttigieg's record, and I hadn't given him too much credence before when I first heard about him. I'm like, he's the mayor. Will he really be able to have the star power or the record to get anything going off the ball in terms of presidential candidacy? But I may have been wrong. So he's actually a fairly progressive South Bend mayor. He's 37 years old for people who want, a young president after our oldest president. And he is the first openly gay candidate. In addition to that, he is the former Navy intelligence officer where he served for, a number of years. And I think what's really interesting is actually in 2000, he won the JFK Profile and Courage Award for an essay about Bernie Sanders. So, mind you, this was before Bernie Sanders became the mainstream figure that he is today. But Buttigieg was able to pick up on, Sanders' leadership qualities. And he said, quote, "A new attitude has swept American politics. Candidates have discovered that it is easier to be elected by not offending anyone rather than by impressing the voters. Politicians are rushing to the center, careful not to stick their necks out on issues. Most Democrats shy away from the word liberal, like a horrid accusation." And so he said this in open and brazen praise of Bernie Sanders in 2000, 16 years before he gained any sort of mainstream relevance. And I think that's pretty worth mentioning. But moving beyond that, he's pro-union, anti-NAFTA, supports universal background checks, supports pulling troops out of Afghanistan, and wants a federal non-discrimination amendment, which is particularly important because we ended up, using the Supreme Court to legalize gay marriage, and in a sense we interpreted sex and, sexuality issues into the 64th Civil Rights Act. But the fact of the matter is, there is a lack of protections for, a very vulnerable LGBTQ community. And certain states have taken a lot of advantage of that, so it's definitely good to make sure of that.
Here's the thing. I didn't know about the whole JFK Profile and Courage Award, but that was written in 2000, right?
Yeah, so he's been, progressive for quite some time.
It'll be interesting to see. How old was he in 2000, right? He's 37.
I mean, he's 37 now,
He may have been 2019. No, 2019, so maybe he was 18. I think he was 18.
Oh, shoot, yeah.
Yeah, so he was 18 back then. And here's the thing. It'll be interesting to see, like, later in the race, and if he does drop out, who he endorses.
Well,
right?
no, I mean, let's not even talk about dropping out right now.
I know. What I'm trying to say is this: like, hypothetically, if he did, right? I know he's polling third. I know he's doing well. I know that he is seems like he's got a cool.
He's not just polling third in Iowa. He also has actually polled really well among Republicans, which is interesting because you would not expect that, especially with someone progressive. But kind of the same way that Bernie Sanders polls actually pretty well with people who support Donald Trump, in a sense. Buttigieg is doing the same thing. So I'm paying a bit more attention to him because not only is he actually good on the policy instead of trying to be a middle-of-the-road centrist, but he also might have that ability to sway away people who were Trump voters, especially if they were people who voted for Obama twice and then voted for Trump.
I think what's going to hurt him is just name recognition, right? Just like most candidates going out there. And he's made a name of himself. People know him like where we live in Fairfield County, but like how many people would know him in like Texas or like other places?
Well,
and I don't know because I haven't seen that. I haven't seen the statistics or information on that. And I know he's polling well in Iowa, but like I said, I just figured out about this dude maybe like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago.
We'll see, because there have been a lot of cases like this, right? Initially speaking, Bill Clinton was not. He was, by no means a front runner. No one expected him to go anywhere. But in some early primary polls, he actually polled not even super high, but just a little bit higher than we expected. And as a result, the media started flanking to him, because they were really surprised by this, right? And so he ended up getting a lot of free media coverage in the same way that Trump did. And that boosted his name recognition and therefore his popularity. So, we're so far out from the election, who can really say for sure right now, but it is possible that we will see a further boost in name recognition for the sheer fact that he's done so well in Iowa. I
still have my reservations about him, because, I get he wants to pull the troops out of Afghanistan, but what about Syria? What about his, foreign policy? Because that's the thing for me. For those of you listening since the beginning, big issue with me is just foreign policy, and just, especially when it comes to the Middle East. Where does he stand on those issues right there? Whereas if we know where Kamala Harris stands.
Yeah.
We know where Cory Booker stands. We know where Bernie Sanders stands. And maybe he's come out and said this, but I just haven't seen it.
Admittedly, I think we both need to do some further digging to Buttigieg. We've been very pro-Sanders since, quite some time now.
That's
so
the
I think we paid the most attention
to him. Here's the thing.
And his
I'm going to do my research about Buttigieg, right? And see and I'm going to start formulating my own opinion. And I'm going to try to do it objectively, try to eliminate my Bernie bias, right?
Bernie bias. I like the sound of that.
Exactly.
Nice ring.
So, but here's the thing. Even though we are a progressive show, and it seems like we're both for Bernie Sanders, other candidates have also caught my eyes.
Elizabeth Warren,
right?
has been on fire.
Here's the thing. Elizabeth Warren, I think, would become as progressive as Bernie, maybe even more so.
She's just a little bit wishy-washy on Medicare for all.
That and her foreign policy. Like I said, I'm going to keep going to her foreign policy. But, as of right now, I think Sanders is still my candidate. I'm still open-minded to see how it goes. It seems like I'd rather take a Buttigieg over a Biden, Klobuchar.
Oh, absolutely, because
that.
At the end of the day, Buttigieg is progressive. I can't speak to his foreign policy. For people listening, Ollie's certainly more the foreign policy wonk. I'm personally more into, domestic stuff. So I can't say so much where he's going with that. But domestically, he does have a pretty progressive stance. The one caveat I want to mention was that he, like a lot of Democrats, has stated that he is for Medicare for all, but at the same time, though he's for single payer, he would not necessarily, try to abolish the majority of private insurance, and he would pursue a more immediate healthcare plan than Medicare for all. The issue is, I'm a little concerned by that kind of rhetoric whenever I hear that from people, because when you walk into negotiation, right, you're going to get watered down a little bit and have to make some compromises with people in your party and people in the opposing party. So I think you need to walk in with a strong form of your argument so you can get the best outcome. If you walk in with kind of a lukewarm, we're going to see what we can do. We're going to not make too much noise at first and see if we can shimmy it through later on. That is, in my opinion, a really great way to get none of what you want.
No, I agree. So I definitely want to see where this goes on. We're really far out. And Biden hasn't even announced yet.
No, but, Biden, he's an interesting case right now because, one, I've seen some coverage of, his behavior in the 90s, his support for, tough on crime, and I've also seen, people talking about how creepy he is, which might be running him over a little bit. And then also, we have to keep in mind, there are so many centrists in the race right now. Like Beto O'Rourke, for example, has managed to get a lot of, Obama fundraisers and organizers behind him, even though Biden was Obama's vice president. Mm-hmm. So I think he's facing his share of difficulties right now, even though he has a lot of name recognition and has been doing pretty well in the polls despite not announcing.
Here's the thing. I'm going to go back to my hypothetical. Let's assume, and this is where my mind is, let's assume that the top two candidates, as we come closer to 2020, or Biden and Bernie, right?
Yeah.
Let's assume that, right? And basically, candidates like Klobuchar, Warren,
Frankie Klobuchar,
Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, they all start dropping on. They start endorsing, right? Of course, you're going to expect the centrists to endorse the centrists, but Buttigieg, my reservation is who would he endorse, right? like, who do you think? Like, yes, he's progressive, but he's also, he's also like a little wishy-washy on some issues, right? So
like, what issues are you referring to?
For example, like,
Medicare for all?
one thing we go, like, and this is just my thing for, like, overall for other progressive candidates besides Sanders, right? 2016, Warren did not endorse Sanders, right? And a lot of people have held that against her. I don't think we should, but a lot of people have. So my issue is,
I think he differs from Warren in that Warren held national office. She was in Senate, and so I imagine Warren's mindset was something along the lines of Sanders is clearly not going to win, especially because we all know Sanders was doing, typical third-party campaign where success is getting the opponent to move, is getting a thought process out there, and in Sanders' case, shifting the Overton window left as opposed to running to win, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think Liz Warren, knew that because she and Bernie Sanders are good friends that go way back, and decided, I'm going to endorse the candidate who's clearly going to win, who has a better chance of getting to office, and so I don't burn any bridges, and maybe I could try to sway Hillary Clinton in some more left-wing ways occasionally when there's an opportunity. Mm-hmm. That's my guess as to what she did. But Buttigieg is a mayor from South Bend, Indiana, right? Mm-hmm. As of right now, he does not hold a national office. Perhaps if he were to lose his presidential race, he would go back to local government or something like that. So there might be no incentive really for him to try and play that game where he endorses a person who has the best chance of winning, especially because he's a progressive himself, right? So if he had to drop out, I imagine he would expect the person to have the best chance of winning to be Bernie Sanders, especially with how he's polling right now.
And let's also remind ourselves, like, Buttigieg hasn't even officially declared his candidacy. He's only exploring to run, right? And here's the thing. I feel like, I watched him, super charismatic guy, right? He's got a nice voice. He speaks. And he seems like really friendly, right? Not that I don't think charisma should.
It shouldn't matter so much, but it does.
But he's not. He's
part of.
He's not. He's not like corporate Booker Spartacus, right? Where it's like cringy, right?
Or Beto or Dork.
Right? Or when Elizabeth Warren cracked open a beer can on Instagram Live or something.
But Elizabeth Warren she's been better lately. Did you catch her running to the train? Keep up, TMZ. There's also...
I have seen that, you're right.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting how she lit up and came alive during her town hall when she was asked... What was the question she was asked that really caused her to go off again? I can't even remember.
It has to be something with capitalism.
Maybe it may have been about holding corporations accountable, but the fact of the matter is she came alive and she was really animated. She had some solid answers. I was very impressed by her town hall.
No, interesting. So we'll definitely have to see where Buttigieg is in a few weeks. And so
so I mean, we are coming to a point where the show is going to end soon. But I think this is a story that hasn't gotten too much coverage, but is very worth looking at. And this comes from The Intercept, who have actually written 2 articles about it, but the one
for those who don't know, we are big fans of The Intercept.
Big fans of The Intercept. The one that I'm looking at, in particular comes from Akela Lacey, who discusses the fact that the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, who are responsible for, obviously, congressional campaigns, whereas the DANC is for, these national presidential campaigns, right? They have made a move to prevent basically they will refuse to work with vendors, contractors and political consultants who work with primary challengers to establish Democrats. And so this is rather interesting and I think more like appalling, really. Here's a quote from, this arrangement. I understand the above statement that the DCCC will not conduct business with, nor recommend to any of its targeted campaigns, any consultant that works with an opponent of a sitting member of the House Democratic Caucus.
Mm-hmm. So much for unity, am I right?
Yeah, and so right there, I mean, they can say that that's towards their unity argument, but really what that does is we have a stagnant Congress, who are mainly there through incumbency advantage, who are enjoyed less than cockroaches and mudslides by the American Republic, who have been largely unresponsive over the last, basically majority of our life with, all this gridlock that we've been seeing. And lately, we've seen a crop of Democrats, often through the Justice Democrats field, who have been inspiring, who have been more representative of the American people in terms of demographics and beliefs, and Democrats have stood firmly against it. And I think it's rather telling that Democrats time and time again will talk about unity as if it's so important. That's the key thing, when they never want to unify under good ideas or with people who actually resonate. Because the fact of the matter is, and I'm saying that this, all of you doing the drinking game, take a drink. But the fact of the matter is, they're currently talking about primarying Ilhan Omar and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So, just what happened to unity there? They are, overwhelmingly popular individuals, particularly Ocasio-Cortez within the party, who are, rising darlings, essentially, of the Democratic base. And we are trying to get rid of them while also saying, hey, we will not conduct business with or advertise for anyone who is working with primary opponents.
Well, I mean, like we said, like we've seen the other story with AIPAC and Ilhan Omar, it's just a facade in a way, right? This whole idea of unity. So it's unfortunate. But I truly believe the Justice Democrats are much stronger than this, and they're still going to primary.
I hope so. I mean, even if Ocasio-Cortez, for example, were to get primaried, I can't imagine her losing.
It'd be devastating for the cause. I mean, like for the progressive cause, but and overall,
absolutely.
We definitely have to see. For everyone who have tuned in, thank you so much for listening. We were always on Tuesdays, 6 p.m. WUF.org. We'll hopefully get a YouTube channel up where we can post our live recordings.
We should do it, this week. We'll, give the YouTube name.
If you follow us on Twitter, like we said, follow us on Twitter. You'll definitely know when they're uploaded. For those of you tuning in, thank you so much. Remember, you've been listening to WOF 88.5 Fifth University and on the sweep. And this is yours truly, Ali Haidar.
And I'm Cole Townsend.
And we're signing off. We'll see you next week.
Have a nice night. Stay beautiful.